I was really young, and I had asked my mom to dance. I think I was at preschool, and I came home and I said, I want to be a ballerina. And through that, and she kind of showed me old movies and musicals and things like that. And so to me, it was an extension of something that I was already doing, an art form that I was already doing. And music was such a heavy part of my life growing up with my father and my mother. Just, there was always music playing at the house, good music playing at the house. And so I thought that acting would be, singing and dancing and very magical and fantasy-like, and largely that was all I was allowed to watch, that and I Love Lucy. So I always, in my mind, wanted to be a combination of Audrey Hepburn and Lucille Ball. And it wasn't until later when I really started getting involved and interested and moved to LA, I would take directors and watch one by one. And I remember I watched 2001 and Clockwork Orange back to back and was just blown away. Like, okay, this is so much more than I even imagined, and was so pleasantly surprised just at how much I had to explore and what was ahead of me. Failure is devastating. Like, devastating, but it can motivate you to challenge yourself to be better and to prove people wrong, prove yourself wrong, all these things. So ultimately failure is harder to deal with, but it can bring wonderful things. And success can be hard to deal with in ways of, acknowledging to yourself that you've done something that's made somebody happy or proud or supportive, but not letting that go further than that. So excited. It was a drive that I had made before, because I had gone to kind of see about where I should try to live in Los Angeles and this, that, and whatever. But it felt like nothing before. It's like, okay, this is really, I'm at the precipice of what could be anything I want to make it. And it's completely in my hands, and it's my fault if I don't do what I've set out to do. And I can't be lazy, and I have to hold myself accountable, and I have to budget, and because I was not going with a handful of cash that my parents had given me. So I'd saved up a lot of money because I had been working since I was 14, like teaching dance classes and this and that. So like between that and like some like bat mitzvah money and like this and that, I think I had a little over $20,000. So it's a lot to start off with, but at that point I didn't want to take jobs. I wanted to just live off of that as long as I could, so that every day I could be in a class or thing. I really wanted to be fully committed, and then you get to bare bones and you always book a job. It's just how it is. Like, I remember right before I got Glee, I think I had like $220 in the bank, and because I didn't get paid right away, like you're always waiting for a check. So I just remember towards the end being like, oh, I'm gonna have to ask my mom to borrow a couple dollars. Like, you get the check and you put it in, and you're like, oh, okay, great. It's always the way it works. If you want to do this, you have to know that you couldn't do anything else. You can't want it for reasons of like, or it seems fun, or it seems easy, or it's so often not easy and not comfortable. I can't tell you how many times I've been on set freezing or so hot to the point of exhaustion, this, that, or whatever, and yet it's always thrilling, and I remember when I first moved down here, being on shoots sometimes till like 6 or 7 in the morning, getting like $4, basically, and being the most excited that I've ever been in my entire life. So I think you have to love it that much, because otherwise you won't, you might make it, but I just find that most of the people that I know that have withstood the like trials and tribulations of all of this, like, they just couldn't imagine doing anything else. You're probably going to be wrong a lot. And that's by nature of learning, and that's okay. And I think, yeah, it's not going to be easy, and you have to be persistent and really dedicated. I feel like I've had a few different lives in this business because I started off actually as a dancer down here. The internet wasn't what the internet is now, and it was very hard to find information on agents and things like that. But what wasn't hard was how to find a dance agent. And so there was casting, and I don't know, being the seemingly invincible 18-year-old that I was, I had driven down that day that there was this audition. It started like, I don't know, at 5 p.m. or something like that, because it was my friend's birthday the day before. So I took my car, packed with things, dropped off a few things, put on my dance clothes, and went to this audition. And round by round, people were getting cut, and I made all the cuts, and I had a dance agent. They always wanted me to go on these, music video auditions for like Eminem and Pharrell and, Shania Twain and all these things. And I kept thinking, well, I don't want to be perceived as a dancer. So I would go to these auditions and things like that as exercise, and then they get very frustrated with me that I didn't want to actually do the job. And I just kept hounding them on but I need an acting agent, and I need an acting class. So I started going to this class, this cold reading class, and I became very close to the teachers, and they managed me for a while. And so I would go every day, and I didn't have to go every day, but I loved it so much. I was, if I wasn't there, I was at an audition, and it'd be for like a USC student film or some strange, other, maybe not, maybe slightly questionable experimental student film or this, that, or whatever. And I wanted to learn, and I just chipped away at it. Through my acting class, it was this children's agency, like children to young adults. And my agent, I think I'd been with him for 2 months, and he left to go to another agency. So I got passed on to a different agent, and then she was moving to a different agency, so she took me with her, and then she left to become a manager, and so I went with one of the seniors at that company, who I didn't really feel understood me at all. And so then I was doing a movie with, I was doing this movie, I Am Number 4, and one of the other actors was like, you should meet my agent. So I took a meeting with him, and it was a better fit, and I went there. So there was this kind of toss and turn. I was kind of going all over the place. But it was really interesting because through that, I could tell that nobody really completely understood who I was yet. So it was this period of time where you have to stick to your guns, and sometimes people are telling you you're insane. And looking back, I think I made smart decisions, and I think that now I'm at the point where you really hone in on that and you just don't stray. But it is interesting at the beginning, just kind of that whole confusion of it all, and, wanting to believe people and wanting to believe yourself, and hoping that they kind of mesh together. Just somebody that's very passionate about you, because if they're not, you might just be one of those people that doesn't get many opportunities, and you want somebody that can speak passionately about you and your capabilities, because that's going to be your gateway to other people and getting a shot. To really prepare and make sure that you're prepared to be at that point, because if you haven't studied any, if you haven't kind of found a place where you feel very confident and very ready, it's like anything. You wouldn't want to get up at a recital and sing a song not knowing the words and not having, a musical instrument to accompany you, or, all these things. So I think it's, knowing that you're really prepared to take that next step. Not very important. I just think that I'm at the point where even with, it's been 10 years, and the amount of work that I've done in 10 years, it's always changing. You are always besting yourself, I think, hopefully. And so usually, by the time you have the footage to cut the reel together, you've done something that has surprised you more, or, you know, showcased a few more layers. And so it's hard for me to, you know, willingly hand over things that I've done a year and a half ago or 2 years prior. That being said, I am proud of all those steps, but I think that more often than not, I want to just do a reading, you know, and present the material at hand so that they know kind of what I would bring to the table for that. That being said, I'm terrible at auditions. I'm so much better on set than I am on an audition. So it's a catch-22. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of both. But yeah, I think it's tricky. You want it to be concise. You want it to, I think less is more. And I think that, you know, really be sure that it's showcasing like a few different things, but, you know, the best of the best. Knowing the lines so that you can throw them away. You know, but sometimes you haven't been given enough time to prepare, and you know, you have to have the sheet in the hand and you do this stuff, but I don't know, I just try to, you know, you just try to be as good as you can be. It was very unique. It's not the typical experience at all. I was, on a Wednesday I came in, I did that. On a Friday I was already at an audition here by the beach, and I was told, you know, you need to get back to Hollywood or to the Valley as soon as possible. You need to wear something sexier and you need to straighten your hair. And I was like, oh God, my hair's curly. I'm wearing the same dress that I was wearing the first time. So you're like scrambling back, trying to do what you can, whatever. And did it again, felt very similar. Hearing an hour later that I was going to be testing on the Monday, so from Friday to Monday, so I had to wait the weekend, like, you know, anxious, whatever. I go to Fox, I'm there early, and I leave my phone in the car because I thought, like, I don't want that distraction. So they knew I had checked in and they were curious. Like, I guess my agents and everybody kept calling me because I was walking around the lot and just trying to, like, mentally prepare myself. So by the time I show up, nobody's there. They've all gone looking for me. Finally, I find somebody. I'm signing my paperwork. There's no other girls around, which, you know, when you're testing, usually there's 2 or 3 other girls. There's nobody. And then, you know, Sharon Glenn came out and said, you know, you have the role. You start in 2 days. There's no executives there. I didn't meet Ryan. I didn't meet anybody. And they were watching dailies. And they said, do you want to see what it looks like? I said, yeah. And it was the scene where Corey is singing in the shower, and he's singing for the first time. And, you know, he's on the bar soap, he's doing this, and the angles are so cool, and he just looks and sounds amazing. And I was completely shell-shocked. And I went home and I called my mom and I cried. I was like, I've got this big show. Looking back, there are not any roles that I've missed out on that I've thought, Jesus, like, I would have done something incredible with that. I just think, oh, like, they look so good in that role, and that makes sense, and oh, that played out not exactly how I thought that movie was going to play out. And it was just, you have to keep looking forward, and if we were to cry over every job that we didn't have, you know, didn't get, then you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't stick with this. Well, it depends, because I've worked on TV shows where sometimes the executive producer, like, his word is God, and that is, you know, everybody's on board, every new director is on board, and they'll, you know, direct you accordingly. And then I worked on a show, I did an arc on a show where the executive producers also wrote, also directed. It was just this oscillating thing, and I'd be on set knowing that one of the producers was going to be the next director, and he'd be in my ear saying, like, I think you should play it a little bit more like this. And then the actual director coming up to me and being like, don't listen to what he's saying, or not even knowing that he said and telling me something completely different. And I remember being so conflicted because it's like, I'm a guest star on the show. I have everybody telling me everything. I, am naturally inclined to listen to what the director of this episode is saying because he's going to make me do it until he doesn't want to. But it is one of the most frustrating and confusing situations I've ever been involved in. But usually I would say the showrunner has made it clear the tone and the intentions and all those things. And then, also a lot of times on a show, a director will come in for at most like 3 or 4 episodes, sometimes just for 1, maybe 2. And usually at that, we got to the point, 2nd and 3rd season of Glee, where you're like, not disrespectfully, but, if there was a director saying, well, I think your character is doing this right now, you would really want to ask them why and make sure that they had reasons that kind of fit with this character that you've been building, because not everybody's seen every episode. Most directors wouldn't have seen more than 1 or 2 of a show unless they really were fans of it or really wanted to, overly prepare this or that. So, the lines kind of get blurred a little bit, I guess. But yeah, it's very unique TV and just the way that it works. I like a rehearsal, but within reason. I think that sometimes if you over-rehearse, you are so sick of the lines that you don't want to give it anything anymore. Or I think that there are times when something is so simple that over-rehearsing would just seem a little bit ridiculous. Sometimes if you don't rehearse at all or not enough, the first 5 takes are shit, so it's finding the balance of all of that, I think. I'll never work as hard as I worked on that show. On Mondays you get there at 5 in the morning, go through hair and makeup, immediately have to go and rehearse and go through a dance rehearsal or this or that for the scene that you were shooting, leave mid-scene to go learn part of a dance for something later, or have big dance rehearsals with everybody where everybody has to focus completely because we only have, an hour and a half to learn a whole dance number with all this choreography and, places and things. Get driven over to the recording studio, have an hour to bust out a song, and if you're, you can't be bad because you have to go back to set to film something else. It's like this constant rotation, busy, 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 hair change, this, costume change, that, like hurry up, we can't wait, blah, blah, blah. And, usually we were working for anywhere from 16 to 18-hour days. Like a short day would be like a 13, 14-hour day. There was a few times where a lot of us just got really sick. I remember I had the flu and tonsillitis at the same time. And we had to take an insurance day, but you've got the doctor coming to make sure you're as sick as you say, otherwise you're on set. It's really intense. I think that it's really easy for people to forget that, on any given day, on any set, whether it's a big budget or a small budget, there are people that are working tirelessly to be able to give you a job, to give him a job, her a job. It's not acceptable to be the person that is holding that back. Because, in many different situations, that can be, especially if you're doing an indie film, if you don't have money for day 23, 24, 25, and you're the cause of the holdups of this or that or whatever, then you could run into the issue of the project not being completed. Or you just think about, there's people that work so hard here to go back home to their families and this and that. And I think that it's just about work ethic, and that's not just in this industry, that's every industry, and you're always going to come out on top if you're the person that leads by example. I mean, it's happened quite a few times, especially, more recently than not. You have to put yourself, I've had somebody say to me, it's always the nice people that get stepped on. But if you don't kind of look at it that way and you think, okay, so they're being difficult, they need this, they need that. Okay, maybe they need me to be a little bit more friendly on the thing, you know, like, hey, I'm gonna go get a coffee, do you want one? I'll bring you back one. Even though you know, like, I am kind of playing into this, there's this satisfaction in knowing that everybody knows that, you know. Or I've worked with an actor who, you know, purposely just ad-libbing and ad-libbing and ad-libbing in hopes that their character gets more screen time, and you have to just be patient and let it happen and act back accordingly. And you know, there's just so many things, and you have to have faith that the director's always cutting for you, and everything that's not necessary is not going to be used, and this and that. So I think it definitely exercises your patience, but at the end of the day, like, you're the one that's applauded, not the other person. Everybody knows childish behavior is childish behavior. I think it's important for a director to be very communicative of what they want and very respectful that, you know, you're here to please them. And you know, I've worked in situations where a director has yelled across the room in front of whole cast and crew, you know, do this right now and be this and whatever, and that does not work for me. There's a process, and you know, most directors adhere to that and are respectful of that, and I think that's when you have the most trust and you have the most, you take the most liberty to really challenge yourself. And so I think that, you know, all those things kind of go into being a good director and making sure that, because it is, you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel that you're in a safe space, and they are, that's one of their biggest jobs, is to make sure that everybody is working well for them and giving them what they need. To be a successful actor, you have to be happy with your work, and proud of yourself above anything else, and satisfied and hungry. And to me, that is a successful actor. To play fair, I mean, there's no ego in a show like that. It's about the team, and it's about that camaraderie, and if it's not there, it shows. And there's plenty of times where you could see where, you know, maybe we weren't all getting along or whatever. Just a few times, I feel like. But for the most part, you know, we were a family and we were brothers and sisters, and we were not always going to all get along. But we had a very big goal to accomplish every single day. And for that reason, there's this bond between us that is, you know, beyond what you would ever experience with most coworkers. We were really made to understand what it takes. You know, I'm not late for set. I don't do things like that. I put my personal feelings aside, all those things, and I've since worked in situations where there are many actors that don't always do that. And I think anybody that's working on a TV show, especially one like ours, you realize that it's unacceptable, you know, and you're just holding people up, and it should be about your entire team, and that's not just your cast, that's your crew, that's people that are there, you know, every hour of the day trying to make something work. Tons of bad habits, because you just get bored. You know, you can't always be riveted on a TV show. If somebody tells you that, I think they're lying to you. Just by the nature of day in and day out, you know, if you're on a TV show for 6 years, even if the writing is stupendous, like, you're putting on relatively the same clothes, usually, you know, or most likely, and, you know, you're using your same voice, and, you know, unless your character's gone through a radical change or this or that, so I think that, you know, you want to avoid bad habits by finding new things to fall in love with about your character, and obviously you're grateful for a job and all of the above. But I do think once that situation changed, like for me personally, it was really important to play very different characters so that I was stimulated in new ways and that I could learn and grow in new ways. And I feel very lucky that that's especially what this last year has been about, is just really just different genres and different aged characters and characters with different personalities and habits. Just really trying to stretch myself, because I think that you don't want to be typecast and you don't want to be doing the easy thing. You want to make sure that like uncomfortable is good. Maybe my childhood. One time somebody, I was like getting this acupuncture from this guy. I was kind of like, only done this a couple times. I'm not sure that I love it, but he's like leaving these needles in everywhere. And he said to me, okay, I want you to picture your 8-year-old self, whether you have to think about an actual picture where you know that, or like an experience or whatever. And I want you to say to her, I'm here for you and I love you. And I said it and I started bawling, just tears, 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 tears. And he said, you can love her more. You can always love her more. That's what's gotten you here. And I think that there's so much of your childhood, you're learning, you're growing, you're this, you're that, you're who do I want to be in the world, and people telling you you can or you can't, and that's all what's caused you to be here today as yourself, and allowed you to make changes of this, that, and yeah, I try to always remind myself of that and not be ashamed of those parts of me that were embarrassing and this and that, because I always do embarrassing things even to this day. You can I maybe know how to put myself together in a very different way. I know how to put on my makeup to a degree and, wear a leather jacket, and feel kind of cool or whatever, but I might go outside and trip and I might do all these things. And I think that's what makes me a good actor, is not taking yourself too seriously and accepting every part of your journey as preparation for the next step. In becoming an actor, you have access to so much more knowledge, people, interaction, charity work, things that you can get involved with, and support and help out and this and that. And I think, just the more you know, the more you feel, the more I feel responsible to kind of help and shape and be a part of. I think that there are certain things that you wouldn't wish upon anybody. You would never wish upon anybody to be chased by men with cameras yelling terrible things at you, or hiding in bushes and taking pictures of you. Those kind of things. It's like you don't even want to put energy into thinking that that exists in your life. And all the things that it affords are amazing. Like to be able to travel the world and see places and meet people and hear stories that ordinarily you might not get the chance to do, that to me is one of the greatest gifts that I could have in this industry, in this career. All of those things that this affords you, and it far outweighs the nastiness. When I worked with Robert De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer, I would see day in and day out that they always cared so much, and Luc Besson is one of my heroes as far as directors go, and he cared so much. There were no throwaway moments in their performances, even if it was just getting up, picking up a paper, skimming it over, looking out the window. It was always about bringing truth and honesty to those characters, and being fair to other actors in the scene, and you just never saw them not giving a shit. Lately I've been thinking a lot about Julianne Moore. I just think that she's so fearless, and Sophie Loren, Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn, Leslie Caron, Grace Kelly, they were really shaping my idea of women, and they were all so lovely and carefree, and You know, I loved when I would watch Houseboat. I loved that, you know, Cary Grant was this father who was learning to be a father, and Sophia was instructing him that, you know, these things hurt your children's feelings, and this is how you could be a better father. And I remember, you know, my dad was much more business oriented, and I remember there was this scene where, you know, Sophia was saying to Cary Grant, you know, she's afraid of the lightning. It's understandable. And when you say to him, like, there's just two pieces of air coming together, like, that doesn't equate for her. She's scared. You should let her hug you. You know, I remember watching that and being that age and going up to my dad and, you know, explaining to him that I was, you know, afraid of this thing. And so it's interesting because, you know, these women, these strong women, can be role models for so many reasons and make you understand things at a younger age. And, you know, I really, when I watched that film, I learned more about communication with my parents. I've always kind of been more to the prudish side of things. You know, I like vintage dresses and I like covering up more than, you know, wearing a bandage dress. And people might say that the way I dress and present myself is kind of more in lines with being a role model to young children. But I also have very strong views, and I also, you know, I had a shoot with a friend that's a photographer, and we took, you know, it's like artful nude photos where you can't see much. There's a fine line because you don't want people to be afraid of their bodies or ashamed. You know, you want women to feel empowered, and I think it's more the spirit in which you're doing something than, you know, just, oh, well, she was naked in a photo. In our lives, we're naked when we're getting out of the shower. We're, you know, doing these things, and I think that if it exists for the purpose of your character and the story, then it's good. And if it exists just because, oh, let's get a shot of somebody naked here right now, you know, I think that my audience is growing with me, growing up with me. We're all older than we were, you know, 6 years ago when I started the show. So I think that hopefully it's coming together as it should. I think I would just want her to have as much normalcy in her life until the point that she was 18, because I think that that's what I loved about getting into this industry after I had had middle school and high school and the chance to be silly with my friends and be really studious in school and do all these things. I think I wouldn't want her or him, you know, any of my children to have a childhood that was robbed of as much normalcy as possible. And, you know, the nature of the game is there's scrutiny with acting. You're putting performances in front of people to either respond to negatively or positively or indifferently. So I think that would be, I guess, my biggest concern with that.